All right, welcome to Rob Schmitt tonight. The United States and the West have arrived at a very dangerous crossroads in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin clearly sized up the new White House back in 2021. He saw a bewildered Joe Biden controlled by the same people who let Russia take Crimea, and he licked his lips. Putin invaded 1 year ago, and now a year later, Joe Biden has somehow positioned himself as the savior of Ukraine and the savior of democracy. Marching into Kiev, meeting with Zelensky this week, and today speaking in Poland, a neighboring nation worried about further aggression if the Russians are not stopped.
But there should be no doubt. Our support for Ukraine will not waver. NATO will not be divided, and we will not tire.
So Biden's Polish crowd of supporters there seemed to love a speech in defiance of Vladimir Putin. Sadly, most, if not all, were unaware that the Biden White House has been Putin's enabler for the horrific atrocities that we have seen in Ukraine and all of this aggression. It all started back in 2021 and the Nord Stream pipeline debate. Joe Biden removes Donald Trump's sanctions on the pipeline to appease Angela Merkel after Trump spoiled her plans for a convenient, cheap energy source for her own country. Trump, ironically, for all the trash they talked about him, did more to protect Europe from Vladimir Putin than almost anybody else. Angela Merkel, the leader who had already destroyed Europe once by succumbing to white guilt and admitting millions of African refugees, had one final horrible idea: let the largest Western economy in Europe become reliant on energy from a nation that hates the West. Joe Biden wanted to appease the German chancellor, who had really been the de facto leader of Europe for a long time by that point. Biden was also so one-dimensional, he figured doing the exact opposite of Trump on everything was going to be a key to success. So he helped Merkel achieve her selfish goal for energy from Russia, despite the fact that it wasn't just Trump's White House that knew Germany's energy plan was a pending disaster. In reality, it was much of Eastern Europe that knew that. Countries like Poland, where Biden spoke today, who exist in the immediate shadow of Russia. At the time, a government spokesman from Poland said of Biden's plans to drop the Nord Stream pipeline, "This information is definitely not positive from the security point of view, as we know perfectly that Nord Stream 2 is not only a business project, it is mostly a geopolitical project." The Polish people today cheering for the man who literally put a war on their doorstep. After the sanctions were dropped by Biden, Ted Cruz and Republicans introduced a new bill for new sanctions on German companies tied to the pipeline. The Biden White House lobbied Congress hard against it. Democrat Chris Murphy with a ridiculous spin on why sanctioning the pipeline would not stop Vladimir Putin, who at the time had his troops aligned on Ukraine's border.
If this bill passes, it won't make the Nord Stream pipeline any less likely. It won't stop Russia from invading Ukraine. In fact, it will do the exact opposite. It will make the completion of Nord Stream more likely, and it will be a gift to Russia, dividing us from our European allies right at the moment when we need to be in solidarity with them in order to deter Russian aggression.
All that a month before the invasion. Ted Cruz's bill failed that day, and 6 weeks later, Russia went into Ukraine with the intention of killing Zelensky and taking the capital within 48 hours. An incredibly strong, united Ukrainian army, full of national pride, actually held the Russians off, as we know, and loads of your money has kept Russia at bay for a year now, in a war that should have never happened in the first place. And today, Joe Biden had the audacity to get up in front of the Polish people and tell them that Russia will never win because Joe Biden is working to end Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels.
He thought he could weaponize energy to crack your resolve, Europe's resolve. Instead, we're working together to end Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels.
So Rick Grenell was Trump's ambassador to Germany and director of national intelligence, and he joins us now. Rick, good to see you again. You know, Biden has painted himself as a hero for saving Ukraine, and the press are eating it up. Even Adam Kinzinger with a tweet that I just wanted to put up. Joe Biden's visit to Kiev is great, sends a strong message the U.S. stands with Ukraine. There is absolutely no debate. Trump never would have gone because he would have been too scared, and of course, Russia. What do you say to all this?
In monologue, and the only thing I can think of is we should replay it again, and we should have people just watch it for an hour. It was excellent. Chris Murphy doesn't get any pressure. There's no pushback from the DC media. There's no one saying, "Wait a minute, Chris Murphy, you had this thinking, this strategy that was totally wrong." And if we would have gone with Ted Cruz, if we would have gone with Donald Trump, if we would have gone for sanctions on the pipeline, we wouldn't have had this war. I mean, look, it's unexplainable when you look at what happens in Washington, D.C. and what the Democrats get away with. They dropped the Trump sanctions on Putin's pipeline. What do? They try to pretend like all of us are somehow pro-Russia because we're pointing it out. And we're trying to say, wait a minute, you're calling the firemen, but you started the fire. And this is going to continue, Rob. This behavior from Democrats is going to continue because they're not getting pushback. They're totally reckless. And then we see things like, Joe Biden deciding to go to Ukraine and not Ohio to help the people of Ohio. And everybody knows how disastrous it is right now for Joe Biden's credibility. And
you wonder, I mean, the thing that I thought, you're looking at Duda, the president of Poland, who is a conservative, and in my estimation is more than aware today at the speech in Poland that the guy that is responsible for the fact that there's a war at all, there's Duda and Biden right there. You've got this is the guy that did this, and he's now the hero. And to me, it indicates so much of what, you and I talk about all the time, which is that so much of the diplomacy in this country is I mean, we just have such incompetence at the helm in so many different ways. And these people create these situations, and then they march out there and act like that they're the savior in the moment. And you just wonder what Duda was thinking as Biden is sitting there speaking.
Well, I know Polish President Duda, and I have watched him very closely. When you're the U.S. ambassador to Germany, you're right there. You're right next to Berlin. Is almost closer to Warsaw than Munich. And the reality is that we watched as the Polish really screamed at the Democrats to say, "What are you doing? Why aren't you supporting tougher sanctions on the pipeline? Why are we doing this pipeline? Why aren't you being tougher on Merkel?" No one was tougher on Chancellor Merkel than President Duda. So you've got to know that when he's sitting there with Biden, he knows exactly why they have all of these immigrants in Poland, why this is a disaster. Absolutely.
If you're in the helm in this moment, you're at the helm, you're in charge of this moment 1 year in, how do you get us out of this thing? What's the move to get us out of this thing? How does it start?
Well, look, I'm somebody who is a diplomat. I think that we should be having tough diplomacy. The Secretary of State has his own plane. He should be flying around to all the European capitals, coming up with a very strong deal, some sort of diplomatic deal. Now, I'm not suggesting it's easy, and certainly not suggesting that Russia's going to sign on to it very quickly. But there are ways to peacefully help push this solution. And the United States should be there. Instead of us just pushing war, and I think that we should have a strong military, we should be very supportive of NATO, but the State Department is in charge of diplomacy, peaceful diplomacy, and I don't see anyone at the State Department doing that. Donald Trump today had a great video talking about how we're going to have to remove all of the people at the Department of Defense and the Department of State.
We can play
pro-war.
Yeah, Rick, let's just play a quick clip from that, and then we'll just talk for a few seconds when it comes back.
One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out.
I got 15 seconds. Your thoughts on that?
It's totally true. Look, there's a difference between a credible threat of military action and a threat of military action. Yep. Donald Trump had a very credible one, and Merkel used to always tell me, I just don't know what your president is going to do. And I was like, that's the point.
That's exactly the point. Rick, good to see you as always. We appreciate it.